Hey guys, it's Magaz here, connecting you to Airsoft. This video is going to be a test run for the start of a new series that I've been thinking about doing for the longest time. It's an idea that I attempted a couple of times in the past, but didn't quite get the feel of the video right. Since then, I have discovered a Warhammer YouTuber called Northern Exile. North creates a series called Hobby Nightmares, and listening to that, something clicked. The way he puts those videos together is super simple and laid back, and it's exactly what I should have done with the first couple of attempts. So North, thank you for the inspo. I'm stealing your idea and I'm pointing it in the Airsoft direction. For those of you who are also into Warhammer, I'll link his channel at the end of the video. He puts some great content out for the wargaming community. It's super long format and there is a shit ton of it too, so plenty to keep you entertained. So quick TLDR before I get into this, I've recorded this video twice now, and the microphone I was using previously wasn't quite up to spec, and here we go. There was a lot of echo, a lot of background noise, and I wasn't happy with it, and that's not how I wanted to launch this series. So now that that is out of the way, here's the plan for this series. In the first couple of episodes, I'm going to talk over a handful of my personal Airsoft nightmares. Whether it's injury, stupid things I've done, seen or heard about, or dealing with cheaters, new players, or site staff who have a god complex. We will touch on a bit of everything. The plan is once people get an idea of the kind of stories we want to share, you can drop me an email at the podcast email address, bdpod@gmail.com. That's down in the description if you cannot understand what I'm saying. Or jump into the Magaz Discord channel and send me a DM with your story, and I'll read them out on here. Again, the link for that Discord channel is in the description. If it's an issue you haven't, I'll put my thoughts and advice out there, and I'll try to make the whole thing entertaining. I'll start here with a few classic Magaz stories of why I wear a helmet. Some injuries I've had over the years, and we'll see if there's a space after that to add an interesting marshalling tale at the end. Let's jump in with a head injury story from the early days. One of the biggest complaints in Airsoft is headshots. Whether complaining about that is right or wrong, we aren't going to debate that here. Well, I mean, not right now anyway. I'm a firm believer that it's fine to shoot someone in the head if it's onshore, and it's the player's responsibility to make sure they are wearing an appropriate amount of protection for their head and face to prevent any unwanted dents, dings, dental issues and drama. This first story comes from back in the day before a lot of current players left their daddy's ball sacks. We're talking circa 2001 to 2002, back when Airsoft was the Wild West. FPS limits were more of a guideline, the VCRA was almost half a decade away, Yukara? Shit, that wasn't even considered yet. It was the golden age of the British Airsoft scene, before the dark times, before the Facebook groups. Everybody met up on the old blue Airsoft forums. #Airsoft on MIRC was the place to be. Sites were few and far between, and the players, they were a solid bunch with a lot of respect for their very, very underground hobby. Back then, the only site I played at was a little over an hour away called Ambush Airsoft, or Ambush Strines, as it was in a place called Strines in the Sheffield area. It was always a challenge to get to because none of us could drive. We would often blag rides with other local players. By local, I mean players within a half an hour of us that we could convince to pick us up on the way, which would sometimes mean being thrown in the back of a transit van with a dog and everybody's kit. In fact, I have a funny story about an incident en route to an Airsoft game that I'll get to in a future episode. Back in the day, the Airsoft Sniper was a player to be feared. Most of us were using stock TM AEGs with less than one joule, and we all ran .2s or 0.23 gram XLBBs at the most. There was the occasional player who put hundreds into upgrading it to make it a formidable blaster, but even then, it was still probably only hitting about 330. The snipers had 500 FPS custom builds back when it would cost you close to $1,000 to build one. Using Digicon straight 43 gram BBs, I still have a handful of those. They were my absolute favourite BBs for my APS2 for a long time. Going against a 500 FPS gun with a stock AG doing about 270 was always scary. Imagine being a 16-year-old kid in the woods with a higher MP5 and a single 200 round high cap going against a guy in his 30s with a finely tuned rifle waiting to commit simulated murder. It was scary. This one time I was a little bit older. We're talking around 18. I was running my MP5 longbow, which is a project I'm going to do again one day. Watch this space. So I spotted this bloke called Tree Magnet. I'm assuming he was called Tree Magnet because he ran into a lot of trees. He was a sniper for one of the largest teams, Zulu Troop, which later split into both First Dan motor rifles and Team Aardvark respectively. Tree had a Sun Project M40. I believe he had the Sun Project M40. One of their many snipers had the Sun Project M40, and I'm sure it was Tree. It was the scary one on the field, aside from Fortress's gun, which we'll talk about in a second. And it was really, really well tuned. One of their guys' fortress was the tech who worked on all of their guns. He would upgrade them and say, "This gun has been fortified," meaning it was a solid performer, it was dead on the limits. This M40 had been fortified. Not to the same extent as Fort fortified his own custom rifle at one point. So Fort is a special kind of guy. I haven't seen him in many years, but he was a special guy. He custom built his own bolt action rifle using a lot of handcrafted parts and hand machined parts. And he put on a demo for us at the dinner break at the Airsoft game one day. And I can't remember what weight BBs he was firing, but he was using heavyweight BBs, I believe. And his rifle chronoed over 800 feet per second, or close to 800 at least. It was scary, dude, to see that after we were all terrified of these 500 FPS guns, and he's got this one going 800. Of course, he didn't use that in the field. That was just for demonstration purposes. He took the spring back out and put in his stock spring, so it was doing 500 again before he returned it to the field. But the engineering that went into that rifle, incredible. So, I was separated from the rest of the team, and I spotted Tree trying to make a sneak around the edge of the site. I figured I'd go and give him some trouble and try and prevent my guys from being shot in the face, neck and chest. Unfortunately, he spotted me yomping through some undergrowth and fired. The shot missed and he started to bug out. My plan was to get within his minimum engagement distance and prevent him from using that rifle so I could take the advantage. Having an MP5 set to full automatic against his pistol set to semi would put me on the advantage. So I pushed and I pushed as he kept moving away to keep the distance. Occasionally we would exchange fire and then run around a bit again. It got to the point after a little while of repeating the same process that I managed to lose sight of him. I had my MP5 up and I was moving slowly through the woods hoping I'd get the drop on him. I took a moment to stop at a tree and I leant around it to see if I could see him or hear him moving while I was still. It was silent. The distant fire of AEGs way over to my left, meters and meters away. Maybe a grenade going off to the right, 100 meters away. Nothing to my front. He was invisible, like a real sniper, doing his job. Then out of nowhere, I was hit in the side of my head with an Accrington Norrai brick. Absolutely out of nowhere. I saw stars and it sat me down right on my ass. I was looking around on the floor for a second thinking, where the hell is this brick? What? And I was confused because I couldn't see a brick. There was nothing there. There wasn't even like a heavy log or anything that had fallen out of a tree, or so I thought. Then I looked up and saw Tree Magnet cycling the bolt of his rifle, laughing and then waving at me. He managed to get the drop on me and waited until I stopped moving to fire. The round hit me in the side of the head and it hit friggin' hard. There's still a mark on the side of my head to this day from that round. Have you had a similar story to this? Any incidents of a cracking headshot that put you on your ass? If you have, let me know the story. Send it to bdpod@gmail.com or jump into the Discord and send me a DM. The second head injury story comes from the same era and takes us to one of the OG urban sites. The mecca for a lot of airsoft players in the early 2000s. Dragon Valley's original Boys Village site. Now this isn't their current Kerwent site. This is the site they had prior to that, which was absolutely a legendary site at the time. It was in essence a holiday camp. Think Pontins, but quite shit, a bit tiny, and for minors. That's obviously the blokes who get covered in dirt digging about underground, not really tiny young people. It was an amazing site that was well worth driving 5 hours to get to, and that we did. On one occasion, in the back of a Fiat Doblo van, driven by Steve from Fubar Monday. Well, last time I talked to Steve about this, he said it was like doing childcare or something. A bunch of 16, 17-year-old kids in the back of a car, and him in probably like his late 20s, early 30s, with his mate driving this van. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do to get to a game at the best site in the country. Again, big thanks to Steve for that. I still owe you petrol money. If you're in the Leeds area or anywhere in the northwest and you need tech work or you want to buy some new airsoft shit, head over to Fubar Monday in Leeds. It is my favourite store. Steve's absolutely fantastic. He's very knowledgeable. He's a great guy, and the store is fantastic. Anyway, that aside, the final game of the day was set in the gym building. The gym was a sports hall with a basketball net at either end. Along one side of the courts was like this, it's maybe like a chest-high wall. Now, if you're watching this as a video or not just listening to it, take a look in the background right now. I'm going to add images of this so it's a little bit clearer what we're dealing with. These are all other people's Urbex photographs, so I'll leave credit to whoever they were down here as well. So this chest-high wall, behind this are stone bleachers. The top of the bleachers was a single doorway that led to the pool house. The pool house was a greenhouse-style building that covered a reasonably sized swimming pool. If you look at any of these pictures, any contemporary pictures of Boys Village, you won't see this greenhouse sort of thing. You'll just see a pool open to the elements, covered in shit. Anyway, back then, there was this like metal structure, kind of like an old school greenhouse with like plastic, maybe glass at the top covering it. So obviously it's covered so they could swim when it was rainy and sun coming through it to keep it warm. It was quite cool, but it was all mossy and dirty and very smingy. Anyway, that's gone now, but it was there then, and that's what matters, right? Back into the courts, the top and bottom of the court had a single door each. The top opened straight out into the open. As you enter that door to the right is a storage cupboard, and this cupboard is raised up slightly. When you enter it, it goes off to the right. This was used for storing sports equipment. This will be referenced in the next episode, so keep it in mind, hit subscribe, ring the notification bell, and then you'll know when that story goes live. Because that's the story where I broke my knee. Fucking cracker of an event. The bottom end had a door that led into changing rooms, and I do recall some intense firefights in those changing rooms, and on one occasion a girl called Sarah smashed a window through to deploy the biggest hardcore orange smoke grenade into the tiniest friggin' room ever. Good times. Back onto the courts though. There had been several small pieces of cover erected to help the small defending team, which I was part of, do our job, which was holding off the attackers for a set period of time. These barricades ranged from lean-to efforts made from pallets, random crap and tarp, to more stable efforts screwed into the floor. We were the last line of defense. If the attackers made their way into the gym and eliminated us before the time ran down, they would win the game. We didn't have much of a plan. Maybe 8 of us had taken positions inside the gym behind and around the various pieces of cover and doors. As the fight kicked off at the top and bottom end of the gym, the giant orange smoke grenades started being thrown in. These smokes were the size of a Branston beans tin. They were electronically detonated and they poured a ton of bright orange carcinogenic smoke out. This stuff turned your snot, your spit, probably your semen bright orange. Absolutely horrendous but amazing pieces of kit. Within a minute, the whole gym was clouded with this deadly thick viscous smoke. It was absolutely great. The light outside was growing dark and it was very difficult to see. Amazing ambience. Armed with a tri-shot and an MP5K slung onto me with an old British putty as a sling, I decided that we weren't going to hold the gym just by sitting in it, and as the enemy team started to breach both doors, I made a daring, or some might say stupid move by sprinting from my perfectly good cover, across the gym, over the small wall, up the bleachers, followed by a bunch of tracer rounds that started to find their way in my direction, bouncing off the walls near me, and I ran full send through the door into the pool house. For a moment, time stopped. I found my mind taken back to the safety briefing in the morning, where the marshal said, "Remember, if you come running through this door, the pool is very close, and you will fall in. Nobody has done it yet, so don't let the first idiot be you." Or something along those lines. The pool house was also filled with orange carcinogenic clouds, and my mind was racing. "There's a pool here," it said, and as that thought hit the sensible thinking part of my brain, the floor beneath my feet went and fucked right off. I fell face first into the pool. In my panic, trying to salmon my way out of it and rolling around in the air, I made things way worse and I landed head first on the tiled surface of the pool. Suddenly awake again, I sat up in the pool, dazed and feeling sick and dizzy. I looked up at the ceiling of this mysterious prison cell of a room that I'd found myself in. The ceiling was made of clouds, billowing orange clouds, with no doors, no windows, just tiled walls. I need to go sit down, I thought, as I made it to my feet and wandered towards the ladder at the end of the pool. The enemy team had started to enter the pool house from the opposite end and began firing their tracer rounds into my direction. In my memory of the event, I feel that it feels like they were traveling in super slow motion, and at some point I took a hit to the hand and I was possibly in my dazed and confused state trying to catch one of these spooky glow bugs from the magic cloud ceiling room and decipher what the fuck it was. Anyway, with that hit, I headed back to the safe area and sat down feeling like death. This was the last game of the day, so I managed to pack my gear back up and just sit there. We had a 5-hour drive back and I most certainly had a concussion, but I couldn't really relay this to everyone else. All I could say was I fell in the pool. I got a few, "Are you alright?" I'm like, "Yeah," but I was obviously not. My head was killing and I absolutely just wanted to sleep. So that's what I did for the whole ride back, and it's probably due to this throbber of a headache and me probably not supposed to be unconscious right now state that I left my XM177E2 in the back of the van. I did not realise this until a couple of days later. Luckily for me though, Steve found it in the back of the van and kept hold of it for at least a decade until it coincided that I was in his store at the same time as he remembered to bring it in. He's like, dude, so I've got the majority of the XM177 returned to me. I'm going to frame it and put it up in the studio at some point, but anyway, that aside, I was dropped off at my mate Coop's house. It's way across town from me, and I had to walk with a big deployment bag-sized holdall all the way home. I made it halfway before having to call for a lift or just risk throwing up. I learned some valuable lessons that day, one of which is probably don't go to sleep if you have a concussion, and unfortunately for me, it wasn't the final time I would hit my head and see stars at an airsoft game. Some might say I'm prone to taking falls and tumbles, or they might say I'm just always full send. Personally, I prefer that latter explanation. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice as this is going further on, but I am definitely starting to lose it. I am fairly sure I've caught some kind of atomic death bug off one of the kids, and I can feel the Barry Whitus coming in my throat. So if by the end of this I end up all croaky as fuck, I am very sorry. Back to head traumas. Thankfully, the next time I would have a serious impact with my head at an airsoft game was about 8 years later at SWAT's absolutely classic Area 51 site. It was an absolutely amazing British urban site situated at the old John Summer & Sons Steelworks in Shotton, the main building. It was this beautiful old thing with a clock tower on top. It formed part of the main side of the site. We called it the house. Attached to this was an office area with 3 floors in the shape of a capital F, and we called this the F block. We're fucking really original with our names. Opposite the house was the vast safe area, and adjacent to the safe area was a large outdoor section and a building called Hangar 18. Now, for this part of the video, the footage is going to be related to that particular site. I can't find the video of this particular instance. I've spent hours scrolling through so many trips to that site footage trying to find it in amazing 480p, and I just can't find this incident. But the footage you're looking at is going to give you an idea of what the site looked like and just how intense and close quarters it was. So it was in the Hangar 18 building that this bump happened. Hangar 18 was a 2-story building which you could make a lap around on the downstairs floor, then up one of 2 staircases to the top floor, then you can make another lap around and then down the opposite stairwell. You could then come out into the open area. We'd play a game in there twice on the regular skirmish days. On one turn, you would be attacking and having to push the enemy back from room to room until they had done a lap of the bottom floor, up the staircase, around the top floor, and then back down the back staircase and out of the building. Later in the day, the roles would be reversed, and it was the attacking team with the shortest time would be the winner. The entry point into the building was a back door that led into an industrial kitchen. This area was dark, tiled, and filled with stainless steel kitchen worktops, cupboard, and appliances. It was always a tight fight for the beginning of the day, with one way in and a lot of barrels pointing at the entrance. The second game on was cold. It was a barrage of non-stop flying plastic. Generally, the only way in would be a few well-timed grenades in the right spot and a synchronized and aggressive push into the room, with some guys taking the right turn immediately to head behind the chiller cabinets, some guys taking the left turn to head behind the ovens, and some braving the onslaught by pushing straight in. This was the area I had my fall. We had pushed the entire enemy team almost past the next room. The next room was the actual canteen area, and you'd go through this single door into it, and then you were met by this counter. That was a serving counter for anybody in the canteen. The enemy team were beyond the counter, further into the room, and I took a hit trying to get through this door, and I had to return to the starting point to respawn. Enemy fire was still coming into the kitchen through this door, so rather than walking around the steel worktops, which would put me in line with the door, I opted to vault the countertops, then hit the deck and crawl right and into the room on my hands and knees, using the cover from the serving sort of counter to prevent from getting hit. Now, at this point, Paul, the head marshal, he was just to the right of the door as well. And he had mentioned in the morning in the safety brief that there had been some leaks in the kitchen due to recent inclement weather, and some sections of the floor are very slippery. Chekhov's slippery floor. I hit the respawn, turned 180 degrees, and I sprinted through the kitchen, performing a perfectly executed heroic vault over the countertop. My feet hit the tiled wet floor and immediately slipped out to the left. Both of my legs shot up higher than my head as I flipped over, landing headfirst on the floor. I hit hard, within direct view of Paul, and luckily this time, I was wearing a helmet. Unlucky for me, it was a cheap plastic Pasget helmet that offered pretty much little to no protection. I can imagine it did do a little bit to soften the blow, but I remember hitting the floor and seeing white flashes in my vision for a second. It was at that point that I noticed my helmet camera was dangling off, and I panicked about that, so I was scrambling about on the floor trying to attach my camera back to my head, and Paul came running over. I believe he helped me back to my feet as I was mounting the camera, and I was replying to his questions of concern with, "Yeah, dude, I'm alright, don't worry." And then I took off into the next room. Now, the big secret here was, I definitely wasn't alright. It was a hard hit and I felt sick as fuck. My head was pounding. If it wasn't so early in the day, I would have most certainly gone back to the safe zone. But I'm not the most sensible person when it comes to personal injuries, so I continued playing. I think the most important takeaway from this is, if you are playing in an urban site with the potential for head injuries, I would suggest wearing a helmet. And in the event you do hit your head hard, it's probably a good idea to go and seek help from the site staff, get checked over by their first aider, and sit down for a bit. Luckily for me, I wasn't driving home from this event, otherwise it might have been a serious liability. The final story I'll talk about on this one isn't an injury, more of a nuisance, and for a change, it wasn't me who it had happened to. At least not directly, anyway. Dagger Woods in Preston is a seasonal woodland site. It's a great site with a solid community, and I'm gutted that I had to miss the game I was booked in for at the beginning of this season because I was due to have some surgery and it was rescheduled and it conflicted with that event. So it came 3 months sooner than planned, so it's a bonus, I guess, but you know, good news in the long run. But I'm still in recovery and slowly losing the opportunity to get back out to Dagger before the season ends and I have to wait until next year. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, I'll be up to full speed and can do some simulated murder there again. Surgery sob stories aside, for a time around 2021, I was part of the Marshall team at Dagger and spent a season helping out and photographing the players. It was a lot of fun with a great team, a lot of antics and some great memories. One situation, however, was a little bit on the pokey side for 2 players. I had positioned myself in between 2 of the bases on the far side of the stream, closest to the one we call Fallen Tree. No prizes for why it has this name. Again, like I said earlier, we are really original with how we name our bases. It had been a fairly quiet game, with it coming to a little bit of a stalemate on my side. A few players here and there were making attempts to push to the next base and take it from the enemy team, and vice versa, but no ground was really being taken. Out of nowhere, I heard what I believed to be a woman screaming bloody murder. A couple of other players next to me heard it as well, and it did them guys a hecking concern. So I put a call out over the radio to see if anyone else had heard it. The other marshals were either across the stream or by the bridge at the bottom end of the site and well out of earshot of the screaming woman. So I said I would go and investigate, and I took off running towards the noise. As I ran down the back path towards Cornerstone, which is the enemy team's respawn, I saw 2 young lads waving their arms about and screaming like a woman being murdered. Sorry lads, it is what you sounded like though. It turns out there was a wasp nest hidden in some overgrowth, and one of them had stepped on it and mobilised the entire swarm, who'd gone into full send attack mode. So we called a ceasefire. I called Jody and told him what was happening. I tried to pull both guys back away from the hive and towards safety. There was a lot of wasp swatting and swearing going on, but we managed to call a ceasefire, put all the players back to the safe zone while avoiding the infested area, and get the 2 guys out of harm's way where our first aider could attend to them. They were both alright, just shocked and covered in sting wounds. Me personally, I didn't get stung once. It was crazy. There were so many wasps knocking about. It was like one of those crazy 90s killer bee movies where a swarm of buzzy bastards were attacking someone who was panicked and swatting wildly. Luckily, at least one of us there must have been the main character in this movie because we managed to get it through mostly unscathed. I remember there's at one point where there was a wasp trying to sting me in the knuckle. I was wearing my Pentagon mechanic duty gloves, and I've got quite a thick knuckle and it couldn't quite get through, so good times I guess. And luckily neither of them had an allergy, which was great. So we broke for dinner at that point and we totally avoided the bottom half of that side of the site for the rest of the day. It was a crazy sight to see, but obviously nobody got injured really, and we all got out of it unscathed. Mostly unscathed. With that quick tale of terror, we will close out the first episode of Airsoft Hobby Nightmares. The next episode will be some more of my tales of misfortune, and I've got some stories about some friends. I think we'll go into a few tales of teeth-shattering misadventures. But going forward, I'd love to hear your stories too. You can send them over to bdeeppod@gmail.com. Yeah, I know that's the email for the podcast, but we're using it for this too. It's down in the description if you can't hear what I'm saying. I will be making a video about the podcast in the near future. If you want to know when that goes live, or when the next Hobby Nightmares does, hit subscribe and ring the bell. If you want to support the channel like these fine chaps, go over to patreon.com/cbnpc. Thanks for watching, I'm Magaz, and remember kids, the air may be soft, but our balls are hard. Also, go ahead and take a look at this video here if you want to see what Dagger Woods looks like. There is also on screen right now a link to Northern Exile's channel, and more specifically a link to a playlist of his Hobby Nightmare videos. They are definitely worth checking out if you are into Warhammer and want some more interesting long format stories.